Today, class, we're going to talk about mercantilism. Mercantilism is an economic system, and at the beginning of the year, I told you we would spend a lot of time this year talking about economics, which is how we get the resources we want, how we get the money we need. If you look at the word, and if you listen to the word, mercantilism sounds like another word that we talk about called merchants. As Europeans became more familiar with colonies, Europe began to change. Initially, change occurred slowly, but it quickly sped up, and Europe rapidly began to evolve. The Spanish and Portuguese were becoming incredibly wealthy off the gold and silver they were finding in Latin America, which is Central and Southern America. Meanwhile, the English, the Dutch, and the French were also making a good deal of money from farming and from the animal skins that the French were finding. And all of these things brought great wealth to Europe. In 6th grade social studies, you discuss an economic system called feudalism. Now here we have a graph depicting the basic idea of feudalism. At the very top of each country was the king, who owned all the land and all the resources in a country. He in turn would divide the land up and divide the resources up and give bits and pieces of it to some rich nobles. These guys were called the lords. The lords would in turn break the land up that they received into smaller groups and give them to lesser lords. At the very bottom of the European economic system were the serfs, a large group of really, really poor people who had few rights. In theory now, everybody was supposed to be working together to create one powerful country, but in reality, the only people that had any real power and any real happiness were the king and his closest friends. The development of colonies, though, brought an end to the feudal system, and there are several reasons why. For one thing, we discussed the growth of international trade last week, and as people were able to trade all around the world, people from around the world were able to get things that they had always wanted. Also, the discovery of the New World allowed people to go and live there who might not have little rights in Europe, but they could go and have a totally new start in the Americas. And finally, the growth of a powerful merchant class, or business class, allowed more people to get wealth than ever would have under feudalism. This shift in how a country gets the things it wants led to the birth of something called mercantilism. Mercantilism is an economic system in which a government works to try to create a favorable trade network. The Europeans were trading with the Asians to get the spices and the sugars and the things that they wanted. They were trading with the Africans to get the slaves they wanted. All of these things were the goal of mercantilism. A country wanted to get things. The key point to trade, though, for a country is to try to make sure that exports, or the things that they're sending out in trade, are more valuable than the imports, or the things that they're having to buy from other countries. If this works out, then a country can make a lot of money. But if they're having to pay more to get the things they want than they're actually selling, then a country loses money. And this still works today. Now, the wise student would ask, how does this affect America today? The goal of social studies is to find how these concepts, whether it's an economic concept or a political concept, or even a historical concept, how these concepts affect us today where we live. Well, unfortunately, today in America, we have trade deficits. Now, what this means is we're actually spending a lot more money to bring things in than we're making when we sell our things to the rest of the world. If you look at this chart, which goes from the years 2007 to the year 2010, you can see just how much money America is making when we sell things. That's the blue stuff. And how much money we're spending to bring in other country stuff. That's the green stuff. And the red, unfortunately, highlights the difference between the two numbers. So, for example, in the year 2010, the most recent data available, we spent over $500 billion more bringing things in than we actually made. If you wonder why America's kind of in the rough shape we're in right now financially, this doesn't help. The results of a favorable trade network made the European countries become incredibly wealthy. Colonies provided cheap resources to the mother country, or the European country. These cheap resources might be food, it might be cotton to make clothes, it might be some other substance to make clothes, it might be lumber to make furniture, things like that. But the colonies provided cheap resources. The European countries took those resources and made them into things that they could sell for money. Nice clothing, nice furniture. And then they would, in turn, turn around and sell those very items back to the colonies, making the colonies basically pay twice for the things that they wanted to buy. The European countries became incredibly wealthy while the rest of the world stayed poor. European countries, though, had a problem because they all didn't charge the same price for different items. So let's say a farmer in America grew cotton, and then he sold his cotton over to England, the mother country, like he was supposed to, and England took the cotton and made a shirt that they sold for $10. France, meanwhile, maybe also be getting cotton from one of its colonies and sell the exact same shirt for $8. So what was an English merchant supposed to do to make sure they kept that favorable trade network? Well, at those points, the mother countries, came up with two ways of solving this problem. First off, they either outlawed items that were sold from other countries altogether, so an American couldn't buy the shirt from France at all. Or they would create a high tax called a tariff on the item sold from another country. So, yes, you could buy that shirt from France for $8, but then you had a tax that you had to pay of $3 or $4, which then made the same shirt $11 or $12, and it was cheaper for the colonists to buy them from England. Here's a picture showing the same concept, but set in the modern times. Americans grow cotton and make cloth at $4 a roll. Over in Britain, they also make cotton at $4 a roll. But the United States government charges a 25% tariff on imported cotton cloth. This tariff ends up being an extra $1. So suddenly British cloth costs $5 to buy in America. Common sense indicates that you buy American cloth and the American economy grows. Is this the way this always works? No, every country deals with this differently. Today, America is trying to help push for free trade, which would eliminate tariffs. In theory, this could help us because other countries could buy American goods cheaper, but it also puts American workers at a disadvantage because other countries make things cheaper than we do.